Hi, I'm Siham Benz and welcome to The Naked Word, a show for the everyday woman where our story is your story. Today we're talking about generations. Can we see beyond the age lines? Baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, millennials, Generation Alpha. Now, if you don't know which generation you fall into, I'm about to give them to you. If you were born between 1946 and 1964, congratulations, you're a baby boomer. If you were born between 1965 and 1980, you're a Gen X. If you were born between 1981 and 1996, you're a millennial, otherwise known as a Gen Y. If you were born between 1997 and 2010, you're a Gen Z. And just in case we have any younger viewers watching, if you were born from 2010 onwards, you're a Generation Alpha. Now, there are three main areas that separate those generations. They were parenting philosophies, technology, and world economics. Those three things really built the lenses by which we all see the world through. A great example of this is the baby boomer generation, who believed in giving their kids a better life than they had. But unfortunately, that philosophy created the controversial view of millennials that they were entitled. Now, today's episode is not intended to highlight the positives or negatives of any generation in particular. It is just to have an open dialogue, free of judgment, to hopefully gather an understanding. To help me do that, we have a mixture of generations on the couch. Deanna, Natalie, and Suraya. Hi, guys.
Hey, hey.
So we struggled a bit putting this episode together.
Yeah.
Only because we never want to make any generation appear, negative, but we also want to be truthful about our experiences in dealing with them.
Yeah.
Basically. And I thought somebody shared a story, and that was Suraya. A really interesting story. So Suraya, what's your generation?
I'm millennial.
You're a millennial.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you have a teenage daughter.
Yes.
And she's a Gen Z.
Yeah.
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 So how have you found your parenting style as a millennial translate to your Gen Z?
There was multiple factors. So not only a generational gap, but then there was also the values and faith and trying to navigate through all of that in that the way teenagers are now. So my daughter just turned 16 and she wanted to go to an open air party. And normally she goes to just parties that are parental guidance. They go to their house and there's parents there and they oversee the teenagers. And I was okay with that. I would go and I'd speak to the parents. And then
can I just point out as well that in our day, that was very normal.
Yeah.
When you went to a party, Deanna's like, no. But definitely my experience has been, when you go to a party, your parents walk you to the door. They want to see the parents who are at the party. Hi, how you going? Here's my daughter. Yeah. Handing them over and getting that safety.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would make sure that before she went anywhere, with any party or anything like that, that I would have the parents' number.
Yeah.
So moving along to this new party that she wanted to go to, she was really excited because she had just changed friendship groups and she was with the popular girls. And so she said to me, she came home and she was like, oh my God, Mum, I got invited to a popular girl party. And I was like, cool, all right, all right. And then she goes, but it's in Fremantle and it's in the park, it's open air and there's no parental guidance.
Right.
So I was like, great. So she ran off to her room and she was like, can I go? And I said, look, let me think about it. So me and my husband sat down and we just looked at each other and we were like, what does open air mean? Like, what is going on? Like, so
is it like a festival? That's what my mind
we
goes.
figured. And so what she said to me was there was going to be multiple groups from different schools and they're all going to come together at this one party. And I was like, okay, that's about 50 to 100 kids. So I'm figuring 16 years old, there's going to be some alcohol, there's going to be some, drugs, I suppose, here and there. And I thought to myself, okay, this is big. My first response was no. Absolutely not. There's going to be no way that my daughter's going to go to a party that's in the open air. There's no parental supervision. There's going to be alcohol and there's going to be some weed, I suspect. So I thought, no, because if it was in my day, there would be no way that I would go to anything like that at all. So all of these things, and I was like, that's no place for a Muslim girl. She shouldn't be in that environment. Like all these things came up. And I went, okay, I have to make a wise decision here and go, if I'm too strict and if I'm parenting from the way that I was parented, then she's going to start doing things behind my back. And if
you really struggled with that.
Oh, it
really
was
struggled with that.
So difficult because I was in so much fear around going, what is it going to look like?
Yeah.
You know, this is really beyond me. This is not anything I've ever experienced. I was never allowed to go to this. None of my friends and their kids go to things like this. So I was stuck, right? So I'm like, I'm going to give Siham a call. I was like, I don't know what to do. Can you help me, baby? I need support. I'm freaking out.
Yeah.
And you just helped me through it. I just, you know, I said to you, I've got a decision to make around this and I don't want to be too strict and I don't want to be too lenient. I want to find something in the middle. So I said, okay, and we had a conversation around it.
Yeah, and I remember saying to you, you know, with your value set, you've raised your daughter really well. She's respectful and she's responsible.
Yeah.
She's an A student.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about her decision making because she's got this. Like she's got it nailed.
Yeah.
But what you do have to worry about is preparing her for what's out there. Right? What she's about to see.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I've done that. So I turned around to my daughter and I said, okay, when you're going to something like this, you want to really check in with how you feel. And if you get that icky feeling, if you feel uncomfortable or something comes up and you get that icky feeling.
I started laughing straight away because a 16-year-old going to a party, you know, telling them, check in with how you feel.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So we had a group FaceTime call and I just got really real. I got really real. And I said, right, little miss, when you're there, I need to let you know, you need to cover your drinks. First of all, that's like baseline. Whatever you drink, make sure you've got that in your hand. So I'm giving her those safety tips. I'm letting her know, look, you know, when I grew up, yes, there was some drugs. That's the reality. The drugs have changed. If you come around any drugs, I need you to know this is what they are. And if you ever get into any trouble, you need to pick up the phone. If you take something and you feel unsafe, whatever the case is, there is no judgment. This is a no judgment zone. We're all open here. Call me. But just having that really open dialogue, I felt really comfortable because it wasn't my child.
Yeah.
Suraya was on the phone like this.
Yeah. So when I actually heard you giving her all these tips, I was not prepared because I didn't know.
Yeah.
Growing up, I didn't even know what was out there now.
Yeah.
So when you were giving all these tips and insights around what she should be doing, number one, I felt really ill prepared. Number two, I felt freaked out because I was like, oh my God, there's all that out there? Now I'm like, okay, maybe my decision was the wrong one to make.
Is it that you didn't know?
Yeah, I didn't know. I had no idea. And when you were going into the, you know, there could be fentanyl and there could be, you know, ketamine and there could be speed and all these kinds of things. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I freaked out. But then we had a great conversation. We sat down and, you know, I know that she's responsible and I trust her and I had to make the decision and going, you know what, it's more about my relationship with my daughter and trusting her and giving her the opportunity to learn whether it's for her or not for her. And she has to make that decision on her own because the more I suppress that, the more she's going to want to do the opposite. So being able to give her the platform to find her feet in all of that is really important. So when I dropped her off and she was like, okay, I'm just going to go to my friend's house. And so she walked in and she was just wearing, like, I was like, make sure you get a thick jacket and some really thick jeans. Be warm. So she's warm. She's wearing a big jacket and, you know, big thick jeans. And then her friends come to the gate. And they're like in crop tops and
skimpy little skirts.
Little skirts. Like, there was very little covered, right? And I was like, oh my God, they're going to be cold. That was my first thing. She looked like a librarian walking into a whole bunch of, like, you know, really fun teenagers. And I thought, the first thing I thought was she's really out of place. But then I thought, you know what, I can't make that judgment. She really needs to make and discover that for herself.
But I think you really nailed the compromise in that situation between the way that you were raised and what you believe.
Absolutely.
To what your child needs. And you met halfway.
Absolutely, because I know that my parents never let me do any of that.
And
so we did all that behind their backs. So it still happened, but not as bad. Like, it wasn't extreme, but we still didn't have that opportunity to be able to tell them because it was completely not allowed.
I just want to say as well, your daughter felt really supported. She felt really supported.
Hey, Suraya, it's really interesting hearing you talk about that because at 16, I was not allowed to go to the after party of my Year 12 ball.
Okay.
So I ran away from the ball directly to the party. Knowing my dad was going to pick me up, I sprinted to the party.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
And he tried to find me,
Yeah.
and I basically hid from him.
Yeah.
And I remember that moment, and I remember how strict my parents had been. I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. And I remember lying to them a lot,
Yeah.
going, I'm here, when I might have been there.
Yeah.
So your parents are obviously from the baby boomer generation.
Well, mum and dad are in their late 70s.
Yep, so they'd be baby boomers.
Yeah, and I remember that set a precedent. I felt that I lived in a very strict world. So from the age of 16 to probably 26, I spent a life discovering adventure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, I really feel for mum and dad because I think my mum probably had, particularly mum, probably had a lot of sleepless nights.
Yeah.
And how do you navigate? So you are Generation X and you have a son, so he's Gen Z. How have your worlds collided?
Well, for the first time in my life, I feel older than Taj. I always felt, of course I'm older, and you know that in your brain. But when I talk to him and I say, Taj, you know, I try to give him advice about things that are going on. And he says, Mum, what would you know? School's different now. This is different now. That's different now. And for the first time, I feel a bit disconnected. Is it that it's different now? And yes, it is. It's very different. He'll come home with stories about what happens and at school, and I'll say, that never happened in high school for me. And I never ever knew any kids that really went through that either.
Yeah.
I mean, the things that they get up to in school, the things they see and the things they go through are different. It's far more advanced.
Definitely. more
So
advanced.
it's a lot more conversations all the time and being really open and saying, you can tell me anything, I'll never be angry. I'll always listen and I'll give you a very rational view. And if I don't understand, I'm really sorry I don't understand, Taj. But at the end of the day, children are children and adults are adults, and I'm your mum. You know?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. What about you, Deanna?
I had very open-minded parents. Very, very open-minded parents. They preferred that we had experiences, our first experiences of things like alcohol in their presence so that they could take care of us while we were getting ourselves into compromised states, you know. And you get a lot of pushback around that as a parent, you know. There's a lot of judgment and shame attached to letting your child do a thing that other people think maybe they're not ready yet or shouldn't be doing and stuff, you know. But I really believe in that philosophy. My kids are going to do what they're going to do. They are going to explore. I explored, they'll explore too, you know. And just because my parents were like, yes, we'll help you discover your way, that doesn't mean I also didn't run around and do things a bit sneaky behind their back. You know, I can remember sitting around with a group of my friends before a blue light disco, like drinking out of a bottle of Malibu and chasing it with pineapple juice. Do you know what I mean? Passing that around the group. My parents didn't know I did that. Sorry, Mum. You know, but I think it's really important to give kids the safety net of being able to say, hey, I want to do this. And if I don't provide a safe environment for them to do that in, then there's every chance what they're going to do is grab a bottle of Malibu or tequila or Jack's or whatever it is that they want to drink and go to a park, climb a tree, fall out, break the leg. I don't know. You know, I actually get much more worried about the things that can happen to them if they don't have the safety of being in a safe place. That worries me a lot more than giving up my concern and worry about, am I being a good parent right now? What are other parents going to think about me if I let my kids do this in my home?
Okay.
You know, but I'd rather they came to my house, had a party, did what they wanted to do, and I could help them if they needed help. I could clean up anything that happened, you know, and And I will always talk to the other parents involved in those situations as well. My 16-year-old has come to me and said, "Can we have a party at your house?"
Yes.
You know, and I've called the other parents and I've told my kids that if they're going to do that, they have to have their friends talk to their parents, and I will chat with their parents. So it's not the same as walk my kid to the door, but those parents walked their kids to my door.
Yeah, okay.
And we had a chat at the door.
Yeah.
We made sure that everything was out in the open and everyone knew what the plans were.
Yes.
I'm not up for secrets and being like the cool mum because I'm letting them do naughty stuff.
Yeah.
It has to be a community-based conversation. So it is a bit more like a village thing.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? You know, like it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
I really like hooking into that village kind of feeling.
I did that with calling Siham.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And then we were all on this group chat trying to navigate this one thing,
It's so much easier. And the parents that I had those conversations with, they were really grateful that we had the conversation, that I was open enough to talk to them. And they said, you know, there's things about this that are a worry and that are a concern, but I feel very, very glad that my kid has a safe place to land.
Yeah, I love that.
Absolutely.
I love that because I didn't really feel that growing up. You know, my parents were quite strict. And I was the oldest born, so I had a lot of natural responsibility, had younger siblings, so, you know, he was like my little duckling for most of my life, so I didn't really have that safe space. And I have a boomer father. My mum's passed away, God rest her soul. And my dad and I, you know, we clash, I think is a polite way to say it. You know, my dad raised me to be a strong, independent black woman. The number one lesson Dad always instilled in me was, you know, get your education so that you never have to ask anybody for anything. And I loved it, but it created like a pendulum swing. So I found myself in my 30s hyper independent, not going to ask anybody for anything. I don't need anyone in this world. And what that did in my relationship with Dad, how that showed up. And I want to tell this story because I think boomers get a bad rap. I think boomers get a really bad rap. They come across opinionated and overly certain and judgmental. But my dad and I clashed for many, many years. And in my 30s, I got to a point where I was like, look, I can't do this anymore. Every conversation is an argument. He attacks, I defend. So I sat down and had a convo with him. And I listened, and again, the attacks begin. It sounds like attacks. Are they really attacks? Probably not. You know, it's, I don't like the way you parent. You need to teach this instead, whatever. And during that conversation, I did something I'd never tried before, and I tried to feel what he was saying instead of listening to what he was saying. And it's a different experience. When I felt what he was saying, what I was feeling was, from him, I'm just trying to protect you. That's it. I'm afraid of the way you're doing things, and I just want to protect you and make sure you're okay, and make sure my grandkids are okay, and make sure you're financially okay. Once I realized that, everything changed. Everything. Is my dad still opinionated? Absolutely. Has he changed at all? No. No, but what has changed is my understanding of where he's coming from.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
It makes such a big difference, I think, to try and look at things from the perspective of the person who's communicating with you. You know, like sometimes I find it really difficult to relate to the stuff that's going on for my kids because it is so very different. You know, my kids are both Gen Z. Check your form. Check your form. 16
they would be
and 14,
Gen Zs.
They're Gen Zs. And some of their way they explain their lives and the things that happen and the way that I'm just like, why?
Yes.
Why? What? What? But if I take away the words and I stop trying to understand the words and I just like try and hook into their experience, try and like listen to their experience of the world, it really changes the way I see what they're telling me, you know. And it sounds all a bit like airy-fairy and in my head and all that kind of stuff, but it's the only way that I can find access to relating to them. sometimes.
And the truth of the matter is, no matter what generation it is, if you just stop listening to the words for a second and just try and see the experience for what it is without putting any meaning on it or trying to make it fit your understanding of things, you find yourself getting a new view of the challenges that generation faces. That's the reason why I wanted to have this chat today. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives with me. And for the viewer, I hope that shed some light for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time on The Naked Word.